After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabited its galaxy. But these were not the stories that I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers, inspired by the glimpse of a galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today, it is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that so many gifted writers are contributing new stories to that saga. George Lucas, from the introduction of A Splinters of the Mind's Eye, 1996.
Welcome back to the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view. I'm your host, Dormammu, and today we're diving into one of the darker, stranger corners of the Star Wars expanded universe. If Twilight gave us a fractured Jedi trying to remember who he was, then Darkness is the story that whispers, what if you thought you understood the Jedi, and you didn't? This is where the tone shifts. The Republic comics stop playing at surface-level adventures and instead steer us into something more unsettling. A tale about forgotten worlds, secret experiments, the long shadow of war, and most importantly, the question of what happens when Jedi principles are put under a strain they were never designed to handle. Our focus once again is Quinlan Vos, the brooding Jedi Knight who, after his fractured reintroduction in Twilight, continues to walk the line between heroism and something far more dangerous. But in Darkness, the Jedi aren't merely fighting criminals, Sith cultists, or galactic politics. Instead, they're up against an ancient enemy that turns the Force itself into a weapon. This arc, written by John Ostrander with art by Jan Duursema, feels like the moment the Republic comics declare, "You thought this was just side material? Think again." The story is eerie, intense, and layered with moral ambiguity. It's not just another mission, it's a descent into a nightmare where victory might mean losing yourself in the process. So if you're ready, let's step into the mist-shrouded world of Kiffex, where something has awakened, something that even the Jedi can't fully comprehend. Darkness was published by Dark Horse Comics in 2001 as issues number 32 through 35 of the Star Wars Republic series. This places it directly after the arc Twilight, continuing Quinlan Vos's ongoing storyline. At this point, the Republic comics were steadily carving out their identity. Less space opera spectacle, more serialized character drama layered with intrigue, mysticism, and moral unease. The creative team is the same pairing that defined this entire era of Star Wars comics, writer John Ostrander and artist Jan Duursema. Ostrander, of course, was already a seasoned comic writer known for his ability to weave complex political and moral dilemmas into genre storytelling. He had a knack for portraying the Jedi not as flawless guardians of peace, but as fallible individuals struggling with impossible choices. Duursema, meanwhile, gave these stories a distinct visual texture, moody, atmospheric, and at times unsettlingly alien. Her art brought depth to alien cultures and a certain raw intensity to lightsaber duels. Together, their work became the backbone of the Republic series. As for timeline placement, Darkness takes place about 2 years after the events of The Phantom Menace. This is shortly after Anakin Skywalker enters the picture, but long before the Clone Wars tears the galaxy apart. It is an era of peace. The Jedi are spread thin, maintaining a fragile order, while the Republic quietly rots at the core. Quinlan Vos, a Jedi Knight scarred by trauma and wrestling with his own inner demons, finds himself at the center of it all. and in darkness, those demons are given frightening form. At the heart of darkness stands Quinlan Vos. Still carrying the scars of his shattered memory and his uneasy reconciliation with the Jedi Order, Quinlan continues to walk a razor's edge between instinct and discipline. His greatest strength has always been his independence, but here on Kiffex, that very trait threatens to tip him into dangerous territory. Quinlan is forced to question not only his trust in others, but whether he can trust himself. The most tragic threat of the arc belongs to Aayla Secura. When we last saw her in Twilight, she was rescued from manipulation by the dark side, but the damage ran deep. In darkness, her memory remains fractured, leaving her vulnerable, unsure of who she is or where her loyalties lie. When she crash lands on Kiffex, she becomes ensnared by the influence of Volfe Karkko, a Dark Jedi imprisoned there for his crimes. Karkko preys on her instability, offering her clarity and power in exchange for her allegiance. Aayla's journey in this arc is not one of confident redemption, but of perilous temptation. She's a mirror of Quinlan's fears, proof of how easily a Jedi can be twisted when the foundations of identity are torn away. Watching over them both is Master Thalm, Quinlan's mentor and one of the Order's more pragmatic operatives. Thalm represents the steadier path of Jedi discipline, but his presence is not enough to anchor either Quinlan or Aayla completely. Instead, he becomes the reminder that even the wisest Jedi can only guide so far before choice takes over. And then there's Volfe Karkko himself. Once a Jedi Knight, he fell to the dark side and became so dangerous that the Jedi imprisoned him on Kiffex, locking his body in stasis. But power like his does not sleep easily. His spirit lingers, whispering, corrupting, and when Aayla arrives, vulnerable and searching, he seizes his chance. Karkko is less a villain who fights with brute strength and more a corrupter, a reminder of how the dark side feeds on weakness, fear, and longing. Surrounding this personal conflict are the ever-ominous Anzati, the vampiric predators whose hunger for life essence adds another layer of horror to the story. They flock to Karkko, drawn by his dark power, and their presence transforms Kiffex into something more than just a prison world. It becomes a crucible where predator and prey blur, and where survival means facing not just external threats, but the darkness within. Together, these figures weave a story that is not just about lightsabers and combat, but about the fragility of memory, the allure of power, and the terrifying ease with which even a Jedi can fall. The story begins with Aayla Secura, still struggling with her fractured memory after the events of Twilight. While Quinlan Vos has begun to piece his identity back together, Aayla is far from healed. Her past is a haze, her loyalties uncertain, and her confidence as a Jedi nearly shattered. This vulnerability is precisely what makes her the perfect target when she crash lands on the prison world of Kiffex. Kiffex is a foreboding place, a desolate, mist-shrouded planet used by the Jedi and the Republic as a dumping ground for the most dangerous criminals. But it is also a tomb of sorts for a far more sinister prisoner, Volfe Karkko. Once a Jedi Knight, Karkko fell to the dark side, aligned himself with the vampiric Anzati, and became so dangerous that the Jedi were forced to imprison him in stasis rather than execute him. Time should have erased his influence. Instead, his presence lingers like a shadow across Kiffex, waiting for someone weak enough to hear his call. That someone is Aayla. Alone, frightened, and disoriented, she is drawn into Karkko's web. His whispers promise her clarity, identity, and belonging, the very things she craves. Slowly, he bends her will toward his own, setting her on a path that could pull her irreversibly into darkness. Meanwhile, Quinlan Vos arrives on Kiffex, accompanied by Master Thalm. Their mission, to investigate the growing disturbances in the Force and to confront whatever evil festers there. Quinlan, already walking a precarious path, is horrified to discover that Aayla has fallen under Karkko's sway. His mission becomes personal. He must save his former Padawan, not only from external threats, but from herself. The confrontation escalates as Karkko, feeding on the energy of the Anzati who revere him, rises to challenge the Jedi. He is less a brute force enemy than a spiritual corruption, forcing Quinlan to face questions the Jedi are not equipped to answer. How far can one bend the code before becoming the very thing you fear? How do you save someone who doesn't want to be saved? The climax unfolds in the ruins of Karkko's imprisonment. Quinlan and Aayla clash, student against master, trust against betrayal, as Karkko's power reaches its height. Ultimately, Quinlan triumphs, but not through flawless Jedi wisdom. His victory comes from sheer determination and the willingness to risk everything for Aayla's redemption. Karkko is destroyed, the Anzati scatter, and Aayla is freed from his thrall. Yet her scars, like Quinlan's, do not vanish. They linger, reminders that the line between light and dark is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Darkness is less a straightforward adventure and more a gothic horror story, transplanted into the Star Wars galaxy. Mist, prison fortresses, vampiric predators, a slumbering dark Jedi, it all evokes a sense of dread. But beneath the atmosphere is a thematic core that resonates deeply. For example, the fragility of identity. Aayla's memory loss makes her vulnerable, raising the unsettling idea that a Jedi's strength can be undone if their sense of self falters. Volfe Karkko provides corruption and temptation because he embodies the dark side, not as a philosophy, but as a predator. He corrupts not by debate, but by exploiting weaknesses. And there are the limits of Jedi control, because the Jedi Council's systems of imprisonment and suppression are revealed as imperfect. Darkness can be buried, but it does not die. And there is a sense of redemption through loyalty, because Quinlan's devotion to Aayla, despite her betrayal, underscores that compassion, not doctrine, that can sometimes hold a Jedi back from the abyss. In short, Darkness is the story where the Republic comics leaned fully into horror, moral ambiguity, and the fragility of the Jedi ideals. It is unsettling by design, and it leaves the reader with the gnawing suspicion that if a Jedi can fall this easily, then perhaps the Order itself is far more fragile than it pretends. Three, two, one. One of the strengths of the Republic comics, particularly under Ostrander and Dracema, is that they never feel like isolated side stories. Instead, each arc builds on what came before and plants seeds for what will come after. Darkness is no exception. First and foremost, this arc deepens the ongoing saga of Quinlan Vos. His struggles with identity and his tenuous relationship with the Jedi Order make him a far more complicated figure than most Jedi of the era. By forcing Quinlan to confront Aayla's corruption at the hands of Volfe Karkko, the story foreshadows his own vulnerability to darkness. It asks the haunting question, if he can save her now, who will save him when his time comes? For Aayla Secura, darkness is a crucial turning point. Her memory remains fractured, but her release from Karkko's influence is the first true step toward recovery. This sets her up for her gradual rise into the confident Jedi Knight we eventually see in the films. Without darkness, her redemption arc would feel incomplete. Here, she experiences firsthand what it means to be manipulated by the dark side, and what it means to be pulled back from it by loyalty and compassion. The story also contributes to the expanded universe's lore surrounding the Anzati. While they had been mentioned before in scattered sources, Darkness places them front and center as a terrifying alien species. Their hunger for soup, the essence of consciousness, cements them as one of the more unsettling additions to Star Wars' menagerie of predators. Their link to Karkko and their willingness to worship him as a kind of dark messiah demonstrates how easily corruption can spread in the galaxy, even outside the Sith. Thematically, Darkness is a precursor to what the Jedi will face in the prequel era. The Jedi of this time think themselves secure, but the cracks are already showing. Volfe Karkko's corruption and imprisonment are reminders that the Order's response to darkness is often to bury it, rather than to confront its root cause. This mirrors how the Jedi will later fail to see, or perhaps refuse to see, the rising shadow of Darth Sidious in their midst. So while Darkness may feel like a gothic horror side quest, it is in truth a cornerstone. It shapes Quinlan and Aayla into the characters we will follow for years. It expands the mythology of the Force by showing us yet another way darkness corrupts. And it reminds us that the Jedi Order's foundation, for all its pomp and ceremony, was never quite as solid as they wanted us to believe. If Twilight reintroduced Quinlan Vos as a Jedi broken but not beyond repair, then Darkness is where the story plunges into something far more sinister. This isn't just an adventure with lightsabers and villains to vanquish, it's a meditation on weakness, memory, and the terrifying ways the Force can be twisted. What makes Darkness so effective is that it unsettles. Quinlan is not invincible here. He teeters constantly on the edge of becoming the very thing he fights. Aayla Secura is not yet the confident Jedi Knight we'll later see standing beside the like of Kit Fisto and Luminara Unduli. She's fragile, lost, and manipulable, which makes her fall under Volfe Karkko all the more heartbreaking. And Volfe himself, while not as famous as Darth Maul or Count Dooku, remains a chilling example of the dark side's persistence. Even locked away, stripped of agency, his corruption festers, proving that evil in the galaxy rarely dies. It waits. Thematically, Darkness insists that the Jedi are not untouchable paragons. They are people. They make mistakes. They bury their failures. And sometimes those failures claw their way back into the light. Quinlan's triumph isn't a testament to Jedi dogma, but to loyalty, determination, and a refusal to give up on someone he loves. That makes his victory inspiring, but also fragile, because one day, Quinlan himself may need someone to return the favor. Reading Darkness leaves you with that gnawing sense of unease, an awareness that the Jedi's greatest threats are not external, but internal. It's not the Sith or the Separatists or even political corruption that bring them low in the end. It's the fact that darkness can take root anywhere, in anyone. And sometimes, as Darkness shows us, it starts with nothing more than a whisper. And so we leave the mists of Kiffex behind. Darkness is one of those stories that lingers in the mind long after the last panel. Its imagery is haunting, its characters fragile, and its themes uncomfortably honest about what it means to be a Jedi when the rules don't have easy answers. This was the moment when the Republic comics truly began to distinguish themselves, not as background filler, but as a narrative spine that would carry Quinlan Vos, Aayla Secura, and the Jedi Order through some of their most difficult trials. But the beauty of the expanded universe is just as one tale closes in shadow, another opens in light. In our next episode, we'll be shifting gears from gothic horror to the early days of an infamous Master-Padawan partnership. We'll be looking at Jude Watson's Jedi Quest, the first entry in a series that explores the tenuous relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and his new apprentice, Anakin Skywalker. Where Darkness asked us how a Jedi might fall, Jedi Quest begins to show us how a chosen one might rise, and what cracks form between master and student along the way. So join me next time as we step into the uneasy beginnings of one of the most fateful bonds in Star Wars history. This has been Dormammu, and may the Force be with you. Always.